The United States of America, the year 1900, a nation on the cusp of extraordinary change. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, a new spirit of reform began to stir across the United States. Rapid industrialization and urbanization created social problems. Progressivism, a diverse coalition of activists, intellectuals, and reformers, sought to address these issues. Their efforts profoundly impacted the nation's political, social, and economic landscape. The Progressive Era reached a turning point with Theodore Roosevelt's presidency in 1901. His Square Deal aimed to promote fairness and equity for all Americans. Roosevelt's trust-busting campaign curbed the power of big business. He also established numerous national parks, preserving millions of acres of land. Woodrow Wilson's New Freedom program further expanded the federal government's role. The Clayton Antitrust Act and the Federal Trade Commission addressed unfair business practices. The Federal Reserve Act created a central banking system. The 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote. By the early 1920s, the Progressive Era had largely run its course. The reforms expanded democratic participation and made government more responsive. The progressive emphasis on social justice laid the groundwork for future initiatives. The legacy of the progressive movement continues to inspire reformers today. The United States found itself increasingly entangled in global affairs. The sinking of the RMS Lusitania and the Zimmerman telegram pushed the U.S. towards involvement in World War I. In April 1917, President Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany. American troops provided a critical boost to the weary Allied forces. The United States' entry into World War I required massive mobilization. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. The government managed the economy through agencies like the War Industries Board. Propaganda urged citizens to support the war effort. World War I ended on November 11, 1918. The U.S. emerged with enhanced global stature but retreated into isolationism. The war had lasting effects on American society and culture. The lessons learned would continue to influence the nation's trajectory. The Roaring Twenties, a decade of exuberance and innovation. Mass production techniques fueled economic growth. Affordable automobiles revolutionized American life. Beneath the surface, warning signs hinted at the fragility of this prosperity. The Roaring Twenties was a time of profound cultural upheaval. Jazz music captivated the nation, crossing racial and cultural boundaries. Women challenged traditional gender roles, embracing new forms of expression. Prohibition fueled the rise of organized crime, symbolizing the clash between traditional values and the changing social landscape. Section 3. The Shadows of Prosperity. The Roaring Twenties, for all its exuberance and innovation, was not without its shadows. Beneath the surface of economic prosperity and cultural dynamism, social tensions simmered, revealing deep divisions within American society. The rapid pace of social change fueled a backlash from those who clung to traditional values. The rise of nativism and xenophobia led to restrictive immigration laws, such as the Immigration Act of 1924, which established quotas based on national origin, effectively curtailing immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe. The First Red Scare, fueled by fears of communist and anarchist influences, swept the nation. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia in 1917 stoked anxieties about the spread of communism, leading to government crackdowns on suspected radicals and labor organizers. The Palmer Raids, conducted in 1919 and 1920, targeted suspected communists, anarchists, and labor organizers, resulting in mass arrests and deportations, often without due process. Racial tensions continued to plague American society. The Great Migration, which saw millions of African Americans move from the rural South to northern cities in search of better opportunities, heightened racial anxieties. The resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan, a white supremacist terrorist organization, reflected the deep-seated racism and intolerance that persisted in American society. Despite the economic prosperity of the Roaring Twenties, the agricultural sector struggled. Overproduction and falling crop prices left many farmers in dire straits, foreshadowing the economic hardships that would grip the nation with the onset of the Great Depression. Section 1. The Crash a Nation's Dreams Shattered. The year 1929. A year etched in history as the beginning of the Great Depression, a period of economic hardship and social upheaval that would test the very fabric of American society. The Roaring Twenties, with its boundless optimism and carefree exuberance, came to a shuddering halt on Black Tuesday, October 29, 1929. On that fateful day, the stock market crashed, sending shockwaves throughout the nation and marking the abrupt end of an era. The stock market, fueled by years of speculative frenzy and overvalued stocks, finally succumbed to the weight of its own excesses. As stock prices plummeted, panic selling ensued, creating a downward spiral that wiped out billions of dollars in wealth. Investors, both large and small, saw their savings vanish overnight, leaving them financially ruined. The crash of the stock market was not the sole cause of the Great Depression, but it acted as a catalyst, exposing the underlying weaknesses of the American economy. Years of overproduction, coupled with a widening gap between the rich and the poor, had created an unsustainable economic imbalance. The agricultural sector, already struggling with low crop prices, was particularly hard hit. As the economy spiraled downward, banks failed, businesses shuttered their doors, and unemployment skyrocketed. Millions of Americans found themselves out of work, struggling to provide for themselves and their families. Soup kitchens and bread lines became common sights in cities and towns across the nation, a stark reminder of the widespread poverty and despair that gripped the country. Section 2. Despair and discontent gripped the nation. The Great Depression cast a long shadow over American society, leaving an indelible mark on the lives of millions. From the bustling cities to the rural heartland, the effects of the economic collapse were felt acutely. Unemployment soared to unprecedented levels, reaching a staggering 25% by 1933. Those fortunate enough to hold on to their jobs faced wage cuts and reduced hours. Families struggled to make ends meet, often forced to make agonizing choices between food, shelter, and other basic necessities. Many lost their homes to foreclosure, forced to seek shelter in makeshift shacks and shantytowns that sprang up on the outskirts of cities, grimly dubbed Hoovervilles after President Herbert Hoover, whose administration was widely blamed for the nation's economic woes. The Dust Bowl, a severe ecological disaster that ravaged the Great Plains in the 1930s, compounded the misery of the Depression. Years of drought and unsustainable farming practices had left the topsoil dry and vulnerable to wind erosion. Massive dust storms, known as black blizzards, swept across the region, burying crops, livestock, and even entire towns under mountains of dust. The Dust Bowl forced thousands of families, many already destitute from the Depression, to flee their homes in search of a better life. These Okies, as they were often called, packed their meager belongings into dilapidated cars and trucks and headed west, hoping to find work in the agricultural fields of California and other states. Their plight, captured in John Steinbeck's poignant novel, The Grapes of Wrath, became a searing indictment of the human cost of the Great Depression. Section 3. Roosevelt's New Deal, a beacon of hope. In 1932, amidst the Great Depression, a new leader emerged, promising hope and a New Deal. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, elected president, brought optimism, action, and empathy. Roosevelt's New Deal aimed to provide relief, recovery, and reform. One of his first acts was to declare a bank holiday, restoring confidence. Programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps and Works Progress Administration provided jobs. Roosevelt implemented reforms for long-term economic stability. The Securities and Exchange Commission regulated the stock market. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation insured bank deposits. The Social Security Act of 1935 provided social insurance. Social Security became a cornerstone of the American social safety net. Section 4. A Legacy of Change. The enduring impact of the New Deal. the New Deal had a profound and lasting impact on American society. It fundamentally altered the role of the federal government. The New Deal programs provided jobs, food, and hope. It established the principle of government responsibility for welfare. This expansion influenced social programs like Medicare and Medicaid. The New Deal left a lasting legacy on the American landscape. From dams to murals, it created a sense of national pride. The legacy of the New Deal continues to shape American politics and society today. As the 1930s drew to a close, a sense of unease settled upon the world. The Great Depression's grip had loosened on America, but across the Atlantic, a different kind of storm brewed. In Europe, the rise of fascism, with its menacing ideologies of nationalism and racial superiority, threatened to plunge the world into another devastating war. Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime in Germany, fueled by resentment over the Treaty of Versailles and driven by a lust for power, rearmed itself, violating the treaty's terms and setting its sights on expansion. In 1939, Hitler's forces invaded Poland, shattering the fragile peace that had prevailed for 2 decades. Great Britain and France, bound by treaty obligations, declared war on Germany, marking the beginning of World War II. The United States, still grappling with the aftermath of the Great Depression and wary of foreign entanglements, clung to a policy of neutrality. Public opinion, shaped by the horrors of World War I, favored isolationism. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, however, recognized the growing threat posed by Nazi Germany and sought ways to aid the beleaguered democracies of Europe without directly involving the United States in the conflict. In 1939, Roosevelt persuaded Congress to pass the Neutrality Act, which allowed the sale of arms to belligerent nations on a cash-and-carry basis. This policy, while technically neutral, favored Great Britain and France, who controlled the Atlantic sea lanes. As the war in Europe escalated, Roosevelt took further steps to support the Allies, providing them with destroyers and other war materials through the Lend-Lease Act of 1941. The United States' tentative steps towards involvement in World War II were abruptly shattered on a quiet Sunday morning in December 1941. On December 7th, at 7:55 a.m. local time, Japanese aircraft launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack, intended as a preemptive strike to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet, shocked the nation and galvanized public opinion in favor of war. The images of burning battleships and plumes of smoke rising from Pearl Harbor seared themselves into the American consciousness. The attack, which claimed the lives of over 2,400 Americans and damaged or destroyed numerous ships and aircraft, shattered any illusions of isolationism. The date, which will live in infamy, as President Roosevelt declared in his address to Congress, marked a turning point in American history. The following day, December 8, 1941, the United States Congress, with only one dissenting vote, declared war on Japan. 3 days later, Germany and Italy, Japan's allies in the Axis powers, declared war on the United States, officially drawing the nation into the global conflict. The United States, once reluctant to engage in another world war, was now fully committed to defeating the forces of fascism. The attack on Pearl Harbor had a profound impact on American society. The nation, united in its grief and outrage, rallied behind the war effort. Millions of Americans volunteered for military service, eager to avenge the attack and defend their country. The home front was mobilized, with factories retooled for wartime production and citizens contributing to the war effort through rationing, scrap drives, and the purchase of war bonds. With the declaration of war, the United States embarked on a massive mobilization effort, transforming itself into what President Roosevelt called the arsenal of democracy. Factories retooled to manufacture tanks, planes, ships, and munitions. Millions of Americans, including women and minorities, entered the workforce. Rationing of food, gasoline, and other essential goods became a way of life. Victory gardens sprouted in backyards and vacant lots. Propaganda posters urged citizens to do your part and support the troops. American industry, bolstered by government contracts, churned out war materials. The war effort had a profound impact on American society. Women proved their capabilities, challenging gender stereotypes. The war brought significant changes for African Americans. These experiences fueled the civil rights movement. The echoes of World War II marked the end of an era and the dawn of a new world order. The United States emerged as a global superpower, tasked with rebuilding a shattered world. The war left the US and Soviet Union as dominant forces, leading to the Cold War. The US played a pivotal role in creating the United Nations to promote peace. In 1948, the US launched the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe and counter communism. The Cold War began, a global struggle for influence between the US and Soviet Union. The legacy of this era reminds us of resilience, hope, and the quest for a just world.